Okay, so second session, I'm going to run through and I'm going to talk about working with social identity providers and Windows Azure Access Control Service and a bit about the universal providers that we've got now in .NET that you can use with websites against Windows Azure SQL database. And also about Windows Identity Foundation, and also a bit about building custom security token services, if you're into that sort of thing, which is something you may want to focus on. Okay, so this is my website that I built. It's hosted in a cloud app. It's hosted in a web role here. And I've implemented some basic authentication, so I can actually register with the Cloud Gurus site. So I'm going to go onto the register site here. I can never remember what username, so this will be Alan in B. Is it B for Belgium? Yeah. So cool. So Alan in B. And create a user. Now I've created that little user on the site now, and this site is basically a website that's hosted in Windows Azure. I'm just going to check if this is working, so I should be able to log off. I should be able to log back on again, and I should be able to log in. Yeah, and I can log back on with that site. It's a very, very simple authentication that I built into that website, and .NET provides you with a lot of that help to do that. Now, if you're doing this in Windows Azure, we now have universal providers which will run against Windows Azure SQL database. So if I go into the actual database and I do select staff and users, we should be able to see that the Alan NBE has been created as a user, and we've got the various information about that. Now, I've also should have other information I can see. I think it's maybe the memberships table. I'm still unfamiliar with working with these tables. So if we select a star from the memberships, you can see all kinds of interesting things like the password and the password format and the password salt and stuff like that. Now, this is maybe not good news if you're building your own website. It's maybe not good news for the users of the website. I've been on several shopping sites in Sweden where I've basically gone to the website. I've basically looked at the products. I've seen something I want. I've added it to my shopping basket. I've gone to the actual checkout and I've clicked on checkout, and when it says checkout, it says, have you registered with this site? I remember what is your username and password. And then I close the browser. There's many other shopping sites in Sweden where you don't need to register as a user. You basically say, okay, I want to buy these goods. This is my address, ship them to my address with an invoice, and I will pay the invoice. I don't need to specify a username and a password for those shopping sites. I really don't like registering and generating usernames and passwords with sites because I forget them. I don't want to write them down. I don't want to store them in a text file. I don't want to use the same password that I've got from one account for using with another account. Generally, it's not a great way to do things. So the challenges that we have is that when all of these websites, like the one I've just demoed, basically asking for usernames and credentials, what they're doing is generating these identity silos, which is basically information about you that's relevant for that particular site. Everybody in the room probably has at least 3 of these, maybe all of these created with different identities created in each one. So as the actual user of this site, you end up generating all of these different identities. Now, sometimes you want your Windows Live ID to be something you use with your MSDN subscription and your Azure subscription. And you want that to be something different from your Twitter handle. You want to have a different name on your Twitter. Maybe if you want to do that. Maybe your Facebook's going to be something different again. Your Amazon is going to be basically having credit card information, financial information, so maybe you want that separate from your LinkedIn. So there is maybe a need for having separate identities, but this also presents challenges. The information I was showing you when I did a select staff and memberships, you had the password salt or the actual password hashes. At least 2 of these, and I'm not going to mention the names of them, have been compromised, where somebody has basically stolen or downloaded the actual table from the database. So they have your user ID and they have your password hash, and they can actually go in and do brute force attacks, do dictionary attacks, and actually crack the actual passwords that we use with that particular site. If you've registered for one of those that has been compromised, have you used the same username? For example, if I get somebody's Facebook account, you can probably figure out what their Twitter handle is, what their blog login is going to be, what their Amazon login is going to be, and are they going to be using the same password for Facebook as all of these others? There's a possibility. So there's big security risks. So what people are focusing on doing with identity federation and all of this cool technology is to do something like this, where you have a user who has a single identity. The user is now able to select which identity provider that they're going to be using for particular applications, and to be able to actually transfer those different identities. So if you've got a blog or if you've got a user group, people can actually sign into the user group site. They don't have to generate a username and a password for your specific user group. They can use their Twitter account or their Facebook account, or that Windows Live ID or Yahoo ID or Gmail account to be able to actually authenticate with your particular user group. And it's very easy to be able to implement that and set that up in Windows Azure with the Access Control Service. Now, it's pretty much based on claims-based identity. I travelled here by plane and I have my passport with me here. And this is basically a bit like a security token. It is issued by a security token issuer. In my case, it's the government of the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And they basically produced this document which has certain claims about me. So it has my age, my date of birth, my height, it has a photo of me. It also has a lot of security features in it. There's a hologram in it. There's an RFID chip in it. There's basically, all kinds of devices in the way this is produced that makes it difficult to actually replicate this. It also has an expiry date, and so I have to apply for a new passport at a certain point in time. If I take out my wallet, I've probably got 5 or 6 of these actual documents or cards or different claims, security things that have been basically issued by one authority and can be trusted by another authority. So I can present this like I did this morning at the airport, like I can do with my credit card at the hotel, I can do with my driver's license if I want to hire a car. So basically proof of who I am. And that's pretty much the way that claims-based identity works. It shares a lot of these actual principles. So we start to talk about the user as being a subject. We start talking about the issuer of these claims tokens as being an identity provider. And we talk about the application that you're going to be presenting those claims to as the relying party application. So when the user is going to be accessing resources on that relying party, they basically authenticate with the identity provider, provide the username and the password. They get issued with a security token that they can give to the relying party. Multiple relying parties can use those security tokens. So I can use, for example, my Active Directory account at work to log on to other relying party applications that my office has provided that there's this trust relationship, that the relying party trusts the identity provider. So when you're building a website, you can trust Windows Live ID, or you can trust Google, or you can trust Yahoo to act as an identity provider for your particular site. And you will trust the security tokens that are basically sent from that identity provider. So security tokens basically look something like this. They have a number of claims in. This one is saying that my name is Alan Smith, I'm over 21, under 65, I live in Sweden, and I'm Star Alliance Basic. A bit about security tokens is that the security tokens can contain the information which the identity provider chooses to provide. Now, if I want to buy alcohol, or if I want to get a senior citizen's bus pass, I may need to be over 21, and I may need to be over 65. So at the the store where I'm trying to buy alcohol, do they need to know my date of birth? Yeah. No? Not the date, but the year. No. The only thing that they need to know is if I'm over 21. Now, you can have a claims or an actual identity provider that can issue that particular claim. So the way that it works now is the passport will have my date of birth, or the driving license will have the actual date of birth on it. They have to then look at the date of birth and do a calculation to figure out if I am over 21. But the way things that work in with claims-based identity is the claim can just say that I'm over 21. It doesn't have to say my date of birth. That's the only information that they are interested in. That's another thing about claims. There can be all kinds of information about you in Active Directory, that when Active Directory or when the identity provider decides to actually send a security token to the relying party, the identity provider can choose exactly what information it puts within that particular security token before it sends it. Security tokens will be signed. There's a general rule that they have to be signed. You could build a system or implement a system where you don't sign security tokens, but it would be bad news. Security tokens are typically encrypted, though they do not have to be. You can have them unencrypted, but they do have to be digitally signed. So if I decided to actually make the change that I was over 65 instead of under 65, then the relying party would basically realise that the actual security token had been modified. So, looking at how identity providers work, they provide a couple of interfaces, basically an authentication interface and an authentication service. So users can basically use these as an actual person. You can go in and type in your username and password. Also, web services can use WS Federation and a WS Trust, and all these are WS Star protocols to actually allow a web service to be able to get a security token to be able to authenticate, or a client to get a security token to authenticate with a web service. And they do have an actual credential store. So let's look at an alternative way of being able to do this, a different way of being able to actually build this using Windows Azure ACS. Now I'm going to spin up another application in Visual Studio. Now this, instead of the Cloud Gurus application, which I've just demoed here, which is using the traditional sign on and store the credentials in a database, I'm going to take a different approach with this application, which is a simple ACS website. Now, if I view this in the browser, this is just a dead simple site. I've got an actual website. I'm going to be talking about claims. So what I've already added to the default page is I am iterating the claims that have been supplied to this particular web application for this particular user. At the moment, there's nothing. There's just really a name, and the name doesn't really have a value there because I'm an anonymous user. Now, if I want to go to members, I get access to denied, which is good. If I want to go to admins, I get access denied, which is also good. We shouldn't be able to access those areas because we're an anonymous user. Now, if I wanted to, I could build, a logon and credential store and all of this stuff, and worry about all of these the issues related to that. Alternatively, I could use the Windows Azure Access Control Service. So, going into the Windows Azure portal, I'm going to go to this, which is Windows Azure Active Directory. And Microsoft keep rebranding the Azure stuff. I think currently this technology is called Windows Azure Active Directory Access Control Service. I think that's the full name for it. So I'm going to go to the Access Control namespaces. This is one I created yesterday. So I'm going to basically generate a new one, which is going to be called Alan NBE. And I'm going to generate this in the West Europe data center. And I'm going to click on Create. And it's going to take a few seconds for me to actually create that actual namespace there. So the namespace has been created. And after a few more seconds, I think it should appear as being active. So what this namespace will do is allow me to configure it for being able to actually host these various relying party applications and the various identity providers that I'm going to be working with. The first thing that I'm going to do is to add Windows Live ID as the identity provider for that particular website. I'm then going to go through and add the other identity providers such as Google and Yahoo and test different ways of being able to actually authenticate with the particular website. So just while that's spinning up, the members directory, the reason that I could not view anything in the members directory is this web config here. Now, if you've ever taken the ASP.NET certification exams, you probably get a lot of questions on how this stuff relates to who can access at which page. So deny users question mark means no anonymous users can view this particular folder or the content within this particular folder. In the admins folder, I've also got a web.config. But this is saying allow role admins, deny users star. So it allows any users who are in the role of administrators, denies any other users. So even if I'm authenticated, if I'm not an administrator, I can't go in that particular area of the site. So let's just see if this is active. Yep, so Alan in EE is active. And let's go in here to manage. So here's going back to the old style portal, the actual old interface for working with ACS. So this has been around for a long time. It will be hopefully updating to a new portal at some point in the near future. I'm not sure when that will be. Now, the first thing I need to configure is a relying party application. And that's basically going to be the website project that I've created in Visual Studio. So I'm going to click on Add to add that. And the name of this, now I've got into the habit of doing this. So if I go to the actual website that I've got, this is going to be the root URL of that website, and I've got into the habit of specifying that as the name of the application, because if I have simple ACS website deployed in Windows Azure websites, it will be a different URL, it will be a different relying party application, and I want to make sure that I know which particular applications I'm dealing with here. So the Rome, this is basically whereabouts my website is. And the return URL is going to be where ACS is going to be sending the security token. So that's going to be the same there. I can add also an error page if I want to. And then I can do things like working with, which particular security token format do I want with? SAML 2.0, SAML at 1.1, SWT or JWT. I've got a choice of those different tokens. I'll leave it on SAML 2.0. I'm not going to specify an encryption policy. And this is the actual lifetime of my tokens. So the tokens are going to last for 10 minutes and then they will expire. We need to basically get a new token from ACS to proceed. Which identity providers? Windows Live ID is going to be selected by default. I'll leave that set there. And I'm also going to create a new rule group. I'll talk a bit about rule groups later on. And I'm going to click on Save just to save the actual details of that. Now, we have created a rule group. However, we haven't actually populated that rule group with any rules. Now, if you click on Generate for the actual identity provider, it will basically generate some rules for you. And ACS knows what claims can be supplied by these identity providers. So the only one that we get from Windows Live ID, and I'll talk about this later on, is something called name identifier. And that's going to be unique for that particular name in this particular relaying party. So it's kind of a unique identifier. So I'm going to basically save that actual rule group there. And that should have been configured now as my identity provider. I'm then going to go to the application integration section, and there is a link here, which is the WS Federation metadata, which I'm going to copy. And just to show you what WS Federation metadata looks like, it's XML, which describes what the identity provider is going to do. You don't have to, it's kind of like if you've ever worked with web services and WSDL, you don't have to understand WSDL unless you're going to do deep things with web services. You don't have to understand this unless you're going to be doing deep things with generating your own identity providers and so on. So it's just a description of the identity provider. Okay, into my website, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go into the actual identity and access wizard here. Now, this is moving into a technology called Windows Identity Foundation. If you've ever seen any sessions, and I really recommend you go see if he's at a conference, by Vittorio Bertoschi, who talks probably about twice as fast as me with an Italian accent, level 400 content on security. He's well worth watching, and he's the guy who's evangelizing and talking about how all of this stuff works. So here I'm going to enter the path to the security token service metadata document, which is this federation metadata.xml. And you can also browse down if you've got this saved as a file. And I'm going to click OK. And it's basically telling me that web.config has been reloaded. Do we want to reload it? Yes. And if I go in my web.config file now, we've got loads and loads of stuff that has been added. And this is the root web.config in my web application. So I'll run through a bit about what has been added. These new configuration settings for system identity model .services. I'm using .NET 4.5. So if you're using .NET 4.0, I think you see different namespaces appearing here. They have done a rewrite of the actual code here and baked it into the .NET runtime here. There's also a path to the Federation metadata with allow users star on here. They've also basically commented out this allow users star, which allows anonymous access to the actual root directory. And they've basically put in deny users ? And this is on the root of my website. Well, I don't really want to do that because I want anonymous users to actually access the root of my directory. I just don't want them to go in the members or the admin. So I'm going to change that to allow anonymous users to access the root directory. It has also added all this stuff, which is configuring the identity provider for the actual websites and so on, and specifying how it is going to interact with the access control service within Windows, and all this type of stuff here. So let's save this and just go to default.aspx. And now we're back on the website. Now, if I go to the members page, instead of actually saying access denied, we've now got this configured. So the website says, an anonymous user is coming into the actual members site. Well, you need to be an actual registered user for this actual site. So what I'm going to do is to redirect you, and it's really, I should have really been running Fiddler here so you can see what happens. The response gets redirected to Access Control Service. Access Control Service redirects the browser to login.live.com. And you will have seen this if you've ever used things like Active Directory Federation Services, ADFS. If I copy this link and stick it into Notepad, you basically see all this stuff like WA sign in and WT realm equals accesscontrol.windows.net. And the reply is the accesscontrol.net, blah, 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 blah. And there's all types of stuff, sort of linking and signing this particular link. And you'll basically see this link popping up. If you do start working with building your own identity providers, you do start looking in and figuring out what all of this stuff means, and decoding these URLs if you really want to go deep into that technology. So I'm going to log on. And this is going to be my password here, and sign in. And now I'm actually in the members page for this website here. So we've got different stuff that we can view here. We've got some other pages that we can go in, like Cloud Cadets, Cloud Captains, Cloud Masters, and Cloud Gurus. Access is denied to all of those areas, and so we've also got a profile section where you can modify the profile for a particular user and so on. And if I go to the home page, we can now see the claims that have been supplied. Now I've got two claims here. The first claim is that name identifier that I was talking about, that unique identifier here, which basically looks something like this. It's a big long sort of string of text. And also we've got, and this is provided by the Access Control Service itself, the name of the actual, the name of the actual identity provider that is basically logged on with. So that's basically logged on with Windows Live ID. So that's how easy it is to use Windows Live ID as an identity provider for a website. I haven't written any code. I've just gone in and used this wizard and made some configuration changes in the Azure Access Control Service. Okay, so let's add some more identity providers. I'm going to go back to this section into the identity providers, and I'm going to add Google. And it is going to be acting as an identity provider for the simple ACS website that I've got. Let's OK that. And I'm going to add Yahoo. And again, that's going to act as an IP for the actual simple ACS website there. Now, I also need to create my rules. So I go to the rule groups section, into the default rule group here, and I'm going to generate the rules for Google and Yahoo, and click on Generate. Now, we see that quite a few more rules have been generated here. I've got the email address and the name for Google and Yahoo here. And I've also got the name identifier for Google, Yahoo, and Windows Live ID. I'm going to save these rules, and what I'm going to do is to go back to the actual website, and I've got basically a couple of test accounts that I use here. So let's go in and browse this in Internet Explorer, go to the members page. This time we're seeing a different interface because there is more than one identity provider when I try to access that web page. ACS, and this is at allenb.accesscontrol.websites.net, and that's in Windows Azure, that's part of ACS, and it's saying which identity provider do you want. Windows Live ID. I'm really glad that I'm not the only person who's still calling a Microsoft account a Windows Live ID. This portal does need updating for the actual things. Now, Windows Live ID, Google, and Yahoo. So let's go for Yahoo. The other ones respond very quickly. For some reason, Yahoo responds very slowly, so it gives me time to take a pause and take a drink, but it should come up eventually. So here's my Yahoo ID, and I give it a password. And don't keep me signed in. And now it's asking me that Yahoo is going to issue a security token to the website, and that security token is going to contain the following information. That my name is Alan Azor, and that my email address is alanazortest2@yahoo.com, and I need to agree to that. And then I will basically get transitions back to the website. Now, if I go to the home page here, you can see that the claims are different. I've basically got the name identifier here, which is appearing in a different format. I've got the identity provider, but I've also got the email address and the actual name here of Alan Azor. So, which is best, Windows Live ID or Yahoo? And this causes a lot of debate. And people from Microsoft say, this is a really, really bad thing to do. You shouldn't be giving away email addresses like this, because there was something where I think Facebook was using some other identity provider, or one company, I think it was Facebook, was using another identity provider. They were getting all these email addresses that then they used to actually send emails to people. You could look at this as being restricted information. Another reason why you may not like to do this is that Yahoo is saying that my name is Alan Azor. They're basically issuing a claim that is false. My name is not Alan Azor, but they're basically issuing a claim that is not true. It could be issuing something saying my name is Bill Gates. This is just a social identity. Google will also provide the email address and the name here. Now, if you're building a website, you may find it useful to capture this information here. When somebody actually logs onto a user group site, you might say, well, it's useful to have somebody's name, and their email address. I don't want to actually have this big long name identifier. That doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't have any relation to the actual person who owns that particular account. And we'll talk about ways that we can actually have on-site profiles if I get time to cover that actual section there. But different identity providers will provide different claims. That's just basically in the nature of the claims-based authentication. Now, let's look a bit at rules. I've basically managed to log into the members site here. And if we go in the web.config, that is because I have authenticated myself. However, I'm not in any roles. I couldn't get into the Cloud Cadets page because I am not a Cloud Cadet. I couldn't get into the Cloud Gurus page because I am not in the actual group of the Cloud Gurus. And I couldn't get into the admins page because I am not an admin. So one of the things that you can do with rule groups in ACS is customize these rule groups to actually grant users specific privileges. So what I can do is decide that I want an administrator for my account. So I can go into this default rule group here, and these are all the rules that I've got present. Now I can also add a new rule. And here, I basically build up the structure of the rule. And there's a lot of text here. We kind of really need to fill this out and make it a bit easier to use. Hopefully, they will do this in the next section. If the identity provider is Google, which it is, and the input claim type is the email address, that's fine. And the input claim value is, and I've got an actual Gmail account that I can use in one of these web.config files. Here we go. So I'm going to use this to go in for the actual value there, alanazortest@gmail.com. Then what do we do? We've got various things that I can do, and one of the things that I can do is to assign a new claim. I could pass through that, and the reason that we see the email address is that those are the rules. Basically, if the email address exists, then pass it through as email address. And what I'm going to do is to actually grant the role claim as being a specific value, and it is going to be, I'm going to make sure I get this right by going into the web.config here and copy pasting admins into that here. And then here in the actual, I can put a description is in the test@gmail.com is in the admin's role, and save that. And hopefully that should now mean that if I log on with my Google account, I should be able to access the administration area of this site. So let's just see if that works. If I go back here, let's go to the default, view this in the browser. Let's go to the admins page. So what I can do now is opt to log on with Google. So let's just take that address that I had. And now, one of the nice things about Google, which I think you can also do with Windows Live ID or Microsoft account again, is do this two-step verification. So if you want the admin on your blog to actually do two-step authentication with your mobile phone, you can do it fairly easily. To do this on your own website and build it yourself would be challenging, but to do it with Google, it's fairly straightforward. We can even do this. Oh, call your phone and yeah, so it can actually call the mobile phone. Well, let's see if this works. Yeah, I've got a new call. Let's put them on speaker.
Introducing our phone verification system. Your code is 108475. Once again, your code is 108475. Goodbye.
So because Google have set up that actual service there, and I've got this, I can basically use that now and do this two-step authentication for the admins on my site, which is a nice thing to do. I kind of think, see security issues with username and password. Now I've got something that I have no idea what this says, but I assume what they're asking me is, do I want to actually send the actual name and the email address to the site, and I will allow that. That's allow, isn't it?
Yeah. The other one is remind.
Yeah. So now I'm in the admins page, and basically I have actually got to the admins role, and just to actually verify that, we can go to the home page, and you can see here that the security claims role is now appearing here as admins. So that's basically allowing me administrative rights on that site. Okay, now one of the things about working with identity providers, I've basically got the social identity providers running, but one question that comes up a lot is, well, what happens if I want to use my own identity provider? Can I create my own identity provider that plugs into ACS? So there's two real scenarios where companies and organizations may want to use this. The first one is that they have Active Directories within their organization, and they want to use Active Directory Federation services so that when you actually go to your company's time reporting system, you can use your company's domain credentials to log onto that time reporting system. And as Windows Azure is going to be gaining popularity and people are putting services in Windows Azure, if those services are not part of your domain, how do your actual staff, how do your employees authenticate with them? So Active Directory Federation services can also act as an identity provider for ACS. And if you've been working with Microsoft Office 365, you may have used your actual domain credentials at work to actually log on to stuff that is hosted in the Windows Azure cloud that is not part of your domain. And if you look in the URIs when you're doing those authentications, you will see the same type of thing, the WS star standards that are actually going on within the URI. Now, Active Directory ADFS is quite hard to set up and demonstrate, especially if you're a developer like me and not a system administrator. So I basically took this approach of building my own WS Federation identity provider that can act as an identity provider for the access control service. So if I go back to this Cloud Gurus site, I don't know if anybody noticed, but I do have a link here to some Federation metadata. Now, if I click on this link, you can see that this is basically an XML file which is describing the claims that are going to be provided by that particular identity provider. And that WSDL, that actual description file, that metadata, can be understood by access control service. So what I'm going to do is to actually save this. The link there is just HTTP, and ACS will basically throw an exception. It will complain if I try to link to WS Federation data that is not on a secure channel here. But what I can do is save this file down to the actual hard drive. So I'm going to do save target as and drop this in the downloads directory. And there's one I prepared earlier, so let's just overwrite that one. So I'll basically save that to that federated metadata. I can now go back to ACS, and I can go to the identity providers section. Now this time when I click on add, I'm going to choose a WS Federation identity provider. So ADFS 2.0, it's going to be exactly the same procedure. You can also choose a Facebook application if you want to. I'm going to choose this WS Federation, and I'm going to click on next. Here's the display name, so it's going to be Cloud Gurus. And the actual WS Federation metadata is going to be that I'm going to select, which I've just downloaded now. Click on Open Now. And this one I'm going to disable. I'm not using HTTPS, so I'm not going to require that the URLs in the metadata use HTTPS, or it will just throw an exception here. The logon text is going to be a Cloud Gurus. I'm not going to bother with an actual image URL and so on. And it is going to be an identity provider for my simple ACS website, so let's save that. Then back to the rule groups, I'm going to generate a new rule group for the, I'll generate new rules for the Cloud Gurus and click on generate. And it's up to me as an identity provider what claims I supply. So Cloud Gurus, you can see I'm supplying the email address, I'm supplying the name, I'm supplying the name identifier. And was there anything else on page 2? I'm also supplying the role from Cloud Gurus there. Okay, so let's just see what happens when I go back to the actual website. Now, one interesting thing here is I have not modified this website at all. This website is exactly as is. I haven't even changed the configuration. The only thing that I've changed is ACS. Let's go to the default. View this in the browser. And I'm going to go onto the members page this time, show more options. And you can see that Cloud Gurus is now available here as an identity provider for this site. So click on Cloud Gurus, and let's go in here with the LNBE. And I'm now basically on this actual site here. If I go home, you can see that the identity provider is now Cloud Gurus, the name is now LNBE, and I've got the email that I entered and the name identifier. And I generated that myself by just generating a GUI or taking the actual user ID from the database of that. So as well as actually having the actual authentication, this is now actually acting as an identity provider. And the code to write isn't that hard. I don't have time to actually talk about it and run through the code, but I will be doing a blog post that explains how that code works, and I'll hopefully be getting it out in a couple of weeks. So onto the members page. Now I still can't get into Cloud Captains or Cloud Masters or Cloud Gurus. So let's just see if we can solve that problem here. Now, if I go back to the Cloud Gurus site, I'm still logged in as alan.be. Let's just verify that I'm still logged on that login. Yeah, so I've got a cloud quiz. Now it's your turn, and I'm going to take the first answer that somebody shouts out. If you're an Azure MVP, then please don't shout, because you're going to know all the answers anyway. So where is the West Europe Windows Azure data center located? Amsterdam. Oh, sorry. What was the most requested new feature of Windows Azure on Facebook?
Godspeed.
Yeah, Azure MVPs can join in there. Sharks with lasers, yeah. Which name is correct this week?
This week? Third one.
Third one, Windows Azure SQL database.
Same SQL Azure. Cha-ching!
Oh dear, well, that didn't work very well. You scored 2 out of 5. I'm going to try that again because we didn't get a chance to go through all these. I think it locked out when I was pressing next too much. So you had Amsterdam for that one. Yeah. Which Scott is the main man on the Windows Azure team? Scott, go for it. And you got sharks and lasers. What was the official code name for Windows Azure? Red Dog.
This week.
Yeah, so now we got 5 out of 5. Now, the reason I put that in was I wanted to show that it's the identity provider that has the responsibility of issuing claims. And here, I kind of wanted to have a scenario where you've got, one site which is issuing claims about a particular user, and those claims can be issued in a security token and then used by another site for authentication. So one scenario could be, you're building a user group website, and if Stack Overflow acted as an identity provider, you could, have somebody go in and they could go in and they could use their Stack Overflow ID. Now, depending on how many points they've got in Stack Overflow, you could issue different roles to that particular person and say, okay, this guy is a real guru. He's been in Stack Overflow for 2 years. He's answered, 1,000 questions. He's got 25,000 points. Give him, access control to be able to read these various sites. You can basically, based on the user of who's authenticating with the site, issue these various claims about what those, what the user is going to do. So now, if I actually go back to default.aspx, view this in the browser. And let's go to the members page, and we'll log in with Alan in BE. Sign in with Cloud Gurus. So I can now get into these Cloud Captains, Cloud Masters, and Cloud Gurus, because if I look in the actual profile that I've got, into the actual homepage about the claims that are being issued, I've got multiple role claims that have now been issued by the identity provider that is Cloud Cadet, Cloud Captain, Cloud Guru, Cloud Master, and Cloud Newbie. So that's basically a very simple scenario that could be used by organizations. Your company could build an identity provider that other companies could use. So there's lots of scenarios where this could work. Your airline, when you actually log onto an airline and you basically got your VIP pass. If your airline is connected with a hotel or a car hire, the car hire could get a security token, or you could sign in with your airline, get a security token saying you're a gold member that will be basically passed on to the car hire company, which will give you various benefits of that car hire company. So there are scenarios where organisations can share this information and sort of reuse the information present in security tokens and so on. So now on to profiles. I've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm just going to run through a bit of work that I've been doing about sort of how we can work with site profiles. The challenge is that the claims supplied by these social identity providers are not consistent. So LiveID, known as Microsoft account, will provide a name identifier. So will Google, so will Yahoo. However, LiveID will not provide a name and it will not provide an email. So if you want to start integrating these three identity providers with your website and building up site profiles, there's a couple of things that you've got to think about as to how we identify unique users and so on. So I'm skipping through a lot of slides that. Yeah, these are the actual challenges. How can a user be identified? What do we use to identify the user? Google and Yahoo return names, but LiveID does not. And anyway, the names claim can be changed, and it's not guaranteed to be unique. There could be two Gmail users with Alan Smith as their name. There probably are. And if somebody sets up one and then they get married or they change their name, then they're going to be modifying the actual name, so it's not going to be consistent. Email may be a good candidate. However, LiveID doesn't return an email, so you can't really use email. What you have to really use is the name identifier. However, if you're working with a universal profile provider, the name identifier is very often too long to actually fit in the NVAR 50 that you've got, I think, in the actual database. So you can't really use that on its own. We also need to think about scenarios where, how can we actually restrict access to the site? I use this technique for the Windows Azure courses. I put all of the labs onto a website, and people can basically use their LiveID or Google, or they can even use a Cloud Gurus if they don't want to use one of their own identities to actually log on to do the labs on the course. However, I don't want anybody with a LiveID to be able to get onto the actual labs on the course, so I put in some restrictions there. using an access key. So what I do when I'm actually basically working and generating unique identifiers is I combine the name identifier with the identity provider to generate something that's going to be unique. And what I also do is I actually hash the actual combination of the name identifier and the identity provider. So that will generate a unique hash. And because it's a hashed value, that's advantageous for two reasons. People could say, well, storing the name identifier in a database isn't that good if somebody compromises the database. Maybe they can do something with all of these name identifiers. I'm not sure if that's the case, but hashing them means that they can't actually access the name identifiers. Secondly, because it's hashed, it's going to be a shorter value, which will fit into the actual table in the profiles table within the particular database. So one thing I do when I'm actually transforming these is I basically take the name claim and actually transform the name claim and shift it off to a claim which is a given name. Name is not guaranteed to be unique. However, on the website, name is typically used as the actual username. And the username on the website has to be unique. Now, to prevent two Alan Smiths from logging in and having the same username on the actual site, in ACS I just basically transform the name to given name. So the given name claim will be whatever name you've put in Google or Yahoo. The email address, I just pass that through as the email address. So if you're using Google and Yahoo, you will get the email address claim. If you're using a Microsoft account, you will not. Then ACS will add on the identity provider, which I will get in as a claim. And the name identifier claim that I just passed through. Now, in my relying party application, I basically hash these two guys together to actually produce the name claim, which is a hash value, which I then store in the database. So let's just see how this plays ball with the actual profile providers. What I really want to do is to have somebody, when they've actually authenticated onto the sites, to be able to actually generate their actual profile and be able to actually store information about themselves, which then can be retrieved and will basically be linked to that particular login. Now, I've already built the code to do this, and what I've done, there's a couple of things that I've done. The first thing that I've done is within the web.config page, is I have set up the universal profile provider. So this is this actual section here. So the default profile provider is being used. I'm basically using a connection string for it, which is specified here, I think. Default connection, and these are the actual properties that we can specify in the actual profile itself. So we've got the name, the email, the Twitter, the identity provider of the company, and the actual location. Key, when I'm using this for people who log onto the course, I give them an access key. And so the access key is this. So when you actually log onto the site, when you create the profile, put in the access key. And once you've done that, then they will be able to access the course material. So you need to have your Windows Live ID provided with an access key. So it's a bit like if you've used the Windows Azure Pass accounts, you do a Live ID and you put in your key, and it will basically give you the access to the site. But you need to have the key to be able to get access. So that is how you will build it if you want to limit who can actually access the site, but you still want to use social identity providers there. So with that configured, I've basically built in a profiles page. So this is in the members page, and it is the profile page here. And this basically is going to do a bit of coding against Windows Identity Foundation. So I basically go through the claims and get the actual name identifier claim and the identity provider claim. And then I basically have a simple form, and I basically set the actual user interface to the profile. And a bit further down, I think I set the profile to the actual user interface there when they click on the save. And that just basically saves the actual profile information. And I'm using a Windows Azure SQL database again for this site to actually save the profile information there. The second thing I need to do is a bit of claims manipulation. So in the classes section, I think, in the actual code section, I've got a custom authentication manager. So if you listen to Vittorio when he's talking in his sessions, he talks about extending Windows Identity Foundation. You can basically go in and you can basically use it like I did with the wizards and just say, I'm an identity provider and don't need to worry about writing any code or changing any configuration file. You can go in and make modifications in the config file, or you can go a level deeper and start building your own stuff, which is going to extend the Windows Identity Foundation. So this is a custom authentication manager, and I overwrite this authenticate method. So this will basically be called when the security token reaches a website, and it allows me to go through and manipulate these various claims. So this is what I'm doing. I'm basically going through and basically creating an MD5 hash of the name and the name identifier. I'm basically filtering out those two guys, and I'm basically setting that to the actual name claim. So the name claim will be a hash of the name identifier and the identity provider. So that's the actual code there that's going to modify my name claim there. And that's fairly straightforward. I thought it was going to be more challenging, but it's basically that, just to override the functionality in WIF. It's not really hard to do that. I do need to configure that, so I'm just going to do close all documents, bring up the original web.config, and just copy paste the line of code in that was actually configuring that custom authentication manager, which is this one here. So let's copy that, and it goes in, I think, here. And all I'm specifying is that the claim authentication manager to use is the custom CAN that I've created in this actual website, and that's pretty much all I need to do on the actual website. Now, in ACS itself, I was talking about shifting these claims. So I was saying that in ACS, whatever the provider is supplying the name, then transform that to the actual given name. So I don't need to go in and modify. I think 3 of the rules in here. So if I go into the rule group here, anything that's outputting name, which is from Google, Yahoo, and Cloud Gurus, I'm going to pass this one out as given name. So the thing I needed to do is to do that, and this is going to be pass through the name claim from Google as given name, and I need to do the same thing for Yahoo. And the same thing for Cloud Gurus. Okay, so let's save all of that down. And finally, I think I've got 4 minutes left to actually go through and test this. So what I'm going to do is to just right-click on the default page. Let's view this in Internet Explorer. And I'm going to go to the members page, and I'll log in with my actual Yahoo account, which was at the top of the web.config, I think. So now when I go to the profile page, well, that was interesting. Oh yeah, I've already created that profile. Yeah, so yeah, that's confusing. I've already created this profile. So what the profile does is it allows me to actually have the name, the email address, and then also add the Twitter, the company, and the actual location. So I've recently changed companies, so I can update this. And click on save, and that will basically save that particular profile, and it will be there the next time I visit my site. So this is a scenario, and this will also work with Live ID. I'll just basically show you what happens with it with Cloud Gurus quickly. Let's just go there with Cloud Gurus, so members page, Cloud Gurus. Now with Cloud Gurus, when we go to the profile, this is taken from the name from the identity provider, and also the email that the identity provider has. So if you're basically working with a website, maybe they don't want to use the actual email address that they've used to log on to. Maybe they want to use a different one. So I give them the option to change this. So I'm going to say my name is Alan Smith. I'm going to have a I don't have to specify the actual company if I want, and can put in the actual location there and save that profile like that. And that's going to be saved into the database. And because I'm using the hash value for the actual name, and we can, if we go back and look at the actual claims, we should be able to see that. The actual hash value there. The next time I log in with that identity provider, this will be consistent, and that will be used as a lookup for the actual profile information. So I'm storing the profile information locally on the site. However, I'm using the actual social identity provider to be able to actually log on and basically link to that particular profile. Lastly, I don't have time to demo this, but if you log on with Live ID, of course, it will not supply the name and the email. You just basically get an empty profile. But this does allow the user to enter their name and their email if they want to, which is stored locally on the actual site now. So I think I have blogged that. I think I've done a series of blog posts. So if you want, access to the, I haven't really got the code samples available, but if you want more depth on what I've been doing in these actual labs, if you go to my blog, I think it's a series of 4 blog posts which I've done, which is basically looking at ACS. I've done 3 of them, and the last one is going to be creating the custom security token service, which is going to be coming out fairly soon, hopefully. I've got that written, I just need to tidy it up and post it. But that stuff I was talking about, the universal profile provider, that was in part 2 of the blog, just basically running through and talking about these different scenarios. And I do show the code and all of the things in the actual rules that you need to modify and how to actually work with the profile provider. So that's it, 8:45. I'm out of time. As Martin was saying, people do like to hang around and chat, so I will be around to talk and take any questions. Also, take any questions now if you're interested. But thanks very much for inviting me over to present at the user group. It's been great to be down here on such a sunny day. It is a few degrees warmer down here than it is up in Stockholm, so it's nice to come down and wear a t-shirt outside. Thanks very much.